Good evening, all. Okay, it's still pretty hot in the UK, and I thought the Morphy sessions were quite good fun. Just turn this echo off, pardon me. So the Morphy sessions have been quite interesting, I think, and there's quite a few other games to check out, which demonstrate actually, you know, the genius of Morphy, which we may overlook from just focusing on a few of his most classic games. So I thought we could continue this week, and here is a fascinating odds position. This is the start position, and you see here Paul Morphy is actually playing black without a rook here, so we're going to flip the board just to get his perspective. So how do you play without a rook and without a pawn? These seem to be major omissions, and white has also got this extra move e4. So according to Fischer, e4 is the best by test, so that's a pretty good first move. So what does Morphy do here? Well, okay, he actually plays not e5. e5 would immediately be a disaster here, wouldn't it? If black played e5, pardon me, it's actually I've actually got this slightly wrong. It's not even black's move. So white's got this move, and it's actually still white's move. And white played d4. Let's get this right. So he can't even play e5 because they'd be like check. That would be dangerous, as well as taking might be good. So this is an interesting situation. So white's given two moves here basically. So without a rook and without a pawn. So how can black survive? Well, he plays e6, we see c4, and I find that there is something remarkable, a hint of something, which I often play the tango system in Blitz, and the tango is like knight c6, and the knight can tango sometimes to this side of the board, and you're trying to encourage light square weaknesses, and that's why I find this a bit fascinating, that Morphy basically tangos a rook down with knight c6, provoking white to create some dark square weaknesses. White does play d5, and we see knight e5, f4, knight g6. You see potentially there's a dark square issue here with these pawns on light squares, but black material down, you might not believe it's possible to try and exploit that. Let's see, bishop e3, check, knight c3, and now a very powerful move, e5. And as I know from the tango, if you play this and white plays takes, then you can slip in a check sometimes. For example here, you know, queen takes e4 with this knight pinned. This might be starting to be a bit unpleasant as an example, although there does seem to be queen f3 here, but still white doesn't really want to do that, perhaps. So white plays actually queen h5, and there's an immediate threat here of f5. If black, you know, reacts, he doesn't really want the queens coming off to have to play queen h4. Well, he can kick the queen though, knight f6. The knight on g6 is protecting e5 here. Queen goes to g5, and now the bishop drops back, bishop e7 threatening, knight takes e4. So white seems to have misplayed this, giving a nice football in the form of the queen to kick around here. So how does Morphy kick around this football? Well, after f5, we see a powerful move, knight takes d5, discovering an attack on the queen, and now also threatening the bishop. So we see in response to that, white is forcibly losing material now, because unfortunately if he plays queen g3, then can you guess what black can play here? There's only a few of you around, so maybe I hope you can guess what black. I won't necessarily wait 20 seconds at the moment. Maybe I'd say after about 10 seconds actually. If you don't speak it out, what can black play here? Okay, black can actually play bishop h4, nice skewer. So okay. So queen h5, white's having to lose material back for a moment. Knight takes e3, And now there's an unfortunate thing going on with knight c2 check as well. So, it's looking a bit rosier than before, at least for white. For black, being a rook down earlier. King f2. And now black just castles. And all of a sudden, black's looking fine. King takes e3. Okay, check. King f3. And now this football is kicked around a bit more. This queen here with knight f4 attacking the queen. Queen g4. And now another very good move. Can you guess what black plays here? Which is embarrassing to white. Okay, if I give you about 20 seconds, then let's slow it down. So 20 seconds started from now. Black to play. If you want to play chess, please go to the openings book so you don't spoil these guess the move quizzes. So black to play here can play what? Okay, Pat, on play chess. Okay, yes, h5. Driving the queen to only one square. That knight, that pesky knight, is protecting the pawn. The queen can't go to h3. There's only g3 here. And now the queen's had it. Because what does black play here? I'm going to say black has bishop h4. The queen's being checkmated. Bit of an amusing game because black started a rook down and white had e4 played and played another move, and there was the f7 pawn missing, and still this disaster happened. Okay, so that was back in New Orleans in 1854. Let's check out another game. So in 1859 in New York, we're going to jump forward in time when Paul Morphy was in New York playing against James Thompson. So here he's playing white, and you can tell that because there's a knight missing and he's usually the one giving odds. So he's playing white. So knight missing, knight odds. Queen's knight. He plays the bird's opening f4. We see d5, e3, knight f6, knight f3, and now bishop g4, bishop e2, c5. Black doesn't seem to be playing this opening too badly so far. After castles, knight c6, it seems quite modern black's play in response to this bird's opening. b3. But, this is an interesting positional play as well, to try and get a grip on e5, putting the bishop here. e6, bishop b2, bishop e7, h3, and black voluntarily gives up the light square bishop, and gets in this move d4, which potentially is a good strategic break to get in. It's blunting the bishop here. Without a knight here, there's no knight maneuver. This knight's not there, so c4 can't be used as well, so we're just basically blunting this bishop, but black is weakening a bit the light squares with that. But then we see a typical maneuver in the Dutch defense in reverse, queen e1, so the queen can have aggressive intent sometimes on the king side, and also of course the queen can sometimes support e4, e5. Queen b6, which seems logical as well. Strike on this diagonal. Rook b1. Knight b4. And it looks as though knight b4, you might be tempted, well, this c2 pawn, do you want to move this bishop back to defend c2? Or this a pawn, do you want to bother with it? Well, actually, Paul's move, he doesn't bother with it. He just plays queen e2. So what's going on here? Queen e2. Well, I wonder if it's tempting black maybe to play knight takes c2, and I'm not entirely sure what's going on after that. Black wasn't tempted for knight takes c2. So black actually played rook d8, maybe keeping a positional threat of d3, which might be embarrassing. And now again a3 to kick the knight, and again doesn't want to take on c2 here. Now this might indeed be playable to play knight takes c2. It's not that clear cut that it's going to be stranded there, and it might even have d3 coming up to support it. But the knight actually went to d5, so black's not trying to be greedy. He's trying to keep control positionally. King h1, d takes, which does actually mean this bishop's now liberated on this diagonal. D takes. H5, as though black is interested potentially in stuff like h4, and maybe later trying to exploit the g3 square, and also of course stop white from playing g4. So we see actually c4, knight c7, and now b4. And you know, this is really great. These bishops are looking pretty good in this position. This is a very quiet position, Morphy standards, no King's Gambit or anything. So in New York in 1859, he's been mixing things up a little bit with this sort of position, but of course he did have the knight odds. So c takes b4, a takes b4, bishop takes b4 is played. And now we see bishop d4 attacking the queen. The queen's got to try and protect b4. And actually we see rook takes d4, e takes. So why didn't the queen want to go back? Well, maybe doesn't want to lose b7, and also maybe things like queen b2. So he just sacrifices the exchange there, James Thompson. E takes, a5. But there's still pressure. c5, queen a7. Okay, now queen e5 hitting the knight on c7. Knight cd5. Okay, and now bishop takes d5, which means now that g7 is a problem. Black can only play knight takes d5, and he's losing g7. Rook f8, and now, okay, you know, it's starting to be roughly good chances for white now after f5. There's a dangerous threat now. F takes e6. Black tries to parry that with queen a6. Okay. And now we see queen e5, which threatens things like queen b8 check now. f6. Queen doesn't use b8 check though, it goes back to g3. Looking at this square now as well, queen g6. So we see queen c6, f takes e6. So black's clearly messed this up. Now, you know, this looks quite dangerous, this position. Knight e7, check, queen c8, queen d6. Okay, queen c6. Oh, now this is a nice continuation now. So white to play has got a very dangerous pawn on e6. Can you guess what white played here if I give you 20 seconds starting from now? And if you want to play chess, please move to another tab, the openings book tab, just for these guess the move quizzes. So white to play, this is a great one, and personally I've never seen this Morphy game before, but this is showing in 1859 some great stuff. So white to play. It's really quite a crushing move. Can anyone guess it? Right. Okay. So no one will play chess this time. Okay, but someone on stream has mentioned something. which looks pretty forcing in nature, but it's the follow-up. It's the follow-up. Yes, it's the follow-up. So rook takes b4 from Forest. Well done. Rook takes b4. What can black do here? What can he do here? He plays a takes, and then we're faced after rook a1 with very, very serious threats. If black tries queen takes, this doesn't really help matters. C takes, and this is getting to be quite embarrassing. This position here, you know, king d8, e7 check, winning the rook. So black tries actually knight c8, and then we see rook a8. So threatening things like taking and rook c8. Black plays b3, and another actually really cool move, really cool, because this pawn is potentially quite dangerous. It's only 2 steps away. So what does white want to do here, actually? What does white want to do? What would you play here with white rather coolly? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Anyone? Very nice move, this one as well. Very, very powerful. This Morphy's a genius. No kidding. No kidding. No one can find it. So this guy's in 1859 and no one can find the move he played here, which seems to be quite crushing. I think he's well ahead of his time. No one can solve this problem. The pawn is 2 steps away from queening. I'll show you a failure line if you want. If white wants to lose this, you know, queen takes, and we can lose this if you want, like this. How would we deal with this pawn here? This is not looking that hot. We can potentially lose this position. So, you know, maybe we can just about get away with things. But no, he plays a really, really, really powerful move. He plays actually d5. d5. Look at this. Encouraging this queen exchange, because now, you know, white's threatening rook takes c8. You know, after d5, black resigned. d5 was the last move in the game. What does black actually do here? You know, queen takes d6, c takes. What does black actually do here? He's actually faced with mate again. There's no time to push this pawn. And if this, you know, maybe just check, or is this pawn dangerous? We've got to be careful here as well. I think e7 does the trick. We can mop up things and get back in time with rook c1. Okay, so that was interesting as well. So let's proceed. Morphy against Lowenthal, London 1858. And we see here a French defense being played by Johann Jacob Lowenthal. So in London 1858. So d4, d5, he plays the exchange French defense. Knight f3, knight f6. Bishop d3, bishop d6. Symmetrical pawn structure. Knight c3 though, a bit stodgy. Bishop g5. Bit of a stodgy position compared to the old King's Gambit for the moment, but he's collected the light square bishop. Does that mean anything? He's putting a bit of torture on black, now threatening bishop takes d7 to shatter the structure. Queen c7 gets out of the way, unpins, good move. Now rook e3, interesting move for trying to encourage dynamism on the f file, potentially. Black doesn't go in for that, just plays calmly bishop f4. Rook goes back, black takes. So black is playing solidly as well. Bishop takes d7, knight takes d7, keeping the structure intact. Now we get a menacing knight maneuver. This sensitive f5 square is headed to. So very nice use of the f5 square. Knight f8. And now getting rid of, black's defensive bishop might be useful. Bishop g3 takes, and now some f-file dynamism is evident. So he's accepting double pawns though. The price to be paid for that. Knight h7. Knight g5 looks useful. h5 cuts the knight out. h5. So if queen takes, I think we don't have queen takes g3, but we have g6. Let's have a quick look at that. In this position, c4 was played. So if queen takes h5, what does black play? Interesting. I don't know if this is just, he could have taken it, or this is a... Can anyone find if there's a problem here? What does black play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Okay. Yeah. People are saying g6 probably, but I'm cynical about that because of knight h6 check. What do we play here? Oh, hang on. Of course, we just take the queen because we just end up taking the queen here. That's fine. G6 will do. G6 will do. Well done. Excellent. G6 it is. Looks okay. Briefly. So knight h6 doesn't help. Okay. Okay. So good move. h5. So Morphy played c4, and we see knight f6. But now there's a problem with knight f6. Spotted. Knight takes g7 because that f6 knight is loose. Knight g4. Okay, black's cracked up. Knight takes h5. Rook takes d4. His king's been shattered. King safety. Check. Takes. Queen takes. Attacking the rook as well. No time for taking here. Rook takes c4. Rook f5. Coming in for the kill here. Rook g4 to defend against rook g5. Whoops. Hang on a sec. Rook f5. We saw rook g4. Rook e5 now threatening mate with this stuff. Queen c8. Rook e7 threatening mate again. Mating. Queen f8. Queen e5 now threatening rook e8, skewing the queen. Queen g7. Alas, check. King h7, check is end of game here. Either we're going to pick up the rook, or we can even pick up the queen with rook h8 check if we want the queen. But I think we can also just take the rook. So black got slaughtered a bit unnecessarily, perhaps. So a key blunder here was knight f6, allowing knight takes g7. So that was a bit unfortunate for black, but that's the way it went. So let's have a look at another game. So back in New Orleans in 1854, going 4 years earlier, going up, back and forwards in time. 1954, it's hometown, New Orleans. Let's put that back. Okay, Charles Morian against Paul Morphy. So Paul Morphy playing black here, and you'll notice, whoops, without a rook, without a pawn. Okay, what can he do here without a rook and without a pawn? So e4 is played. g6. He's playing the Piet's defense. In fact, I mean, I don't know if these games were made up by some GM a few years back, but why is Morphy expressing modern strategies? This is like the sniper system, just a rook down. This early c5 and bishop g7. This is modern sniper strategy. So it's impressive that he's got a grip on all this sort of stuff. He's not just a King's Gambit player. So bishop d3, he plays b5. I mean, apparently this was 1854, New Orleans. I mean, b5 is nice, to try and use this check, try and squash the bishop. c4, b4. He's got basically a nice dark square grip going on here. a3, queen a5, queen d2. And white's playing quite sensibly at the moment. d6. Knight e2. Now an interesting move, more optimal than knight f6. Knight h6. Why not use this? Nice. This, I think it's slightly more optimal in this position to play knight h6. Both sides castle. Queen c2. And it also, of course, no, knight g4 is still useful anyway. Bishop g5. He ignores the e7 pawn. He goes for h2 here. Okay, h3 is played, which may be a blunder in this position. It looks as though f4 is tempting, but white played h3, which allows knight h2, which the knight, you would think, isn't the knight kind of stranded? Potentially. Well, maybe not. If the rook moved here, we might have some naughty things occurring, like bishop takes h3. But white actually didn't bother moving the rook. White played bishop h6, rook f7, and now moves the rook. Okay. And now we see this move, bishop takes h3. This is a bit towel-like. What's going on here? Bishop takes h3. G takes. Okay, the knight's unstranded itself. King h1. This queen is away from the king, and you'll note in most Morphy games, as a general rule, his queen is around their king. I don't know if anyone's noticed that pattern. Rather like Columbo, he's always next to the person who did the murder right from the start. It's a bit of a dead giveaway. So the queen, what is it doing over here when the king's over here? A paradox, because it's a Morphy game. What is it doing over there? So she goes backwards, queen d8. She wants to maybe swing like this onto that h3 pawn. Knight d2, queen d7. Okay, finally the queen is online with the king. So knight g1. But unfortunately, execution time after knight takes g1, king takes g1, queen takes h3. It is execution time now. And actually, white resigned. Unfortunately, if something like f4 now, I mean, there's even, I think, bishop d4 check is embarrassing because the queen is really covering all the squares. So that would be embarrassing. Yes, I mean, this knight was the only thing which wasn't used. I don't know. This game is just amusing. I don't know what happened here. I mean, it seemed like Paul Morphy literally was playing a kind of modern sniper system, a rook down, and okay, this pesky knight stranded itself for knight f3 check, but it's a great way of destroying the structure around white's king. This whole thing. The structure around white's king, he's isolated some pawns, he's gained access to f3, and the knight and the queen are working well together once they can get coordinated. So this position was probably, I guess, the opportunity for white to try something defensive in nature. So if there's the immediate threat of queen d7 here, how does white actually... I assume that there's defences here. But it's a bit trickier, perhaps. than before. Okay, so let's not maybe analyze it too deeply. It just so happened white got smashed like this. Okay, so let's go on to another game. Okay, so in Paris 1863, so he's going all around Europe and stuff, so brilliant. And he knows many languages fluently. He's very erudite, and he's also digested all the chess books of the time. And I think Kasparov has indicated it's his eruditeness which really makes him shine in conjunction with his huge natural talent. But I think that also made him able to travel much more easily and speak the languages needed. So here, Paul Morphy, b3, he was playing white. Plays b3 against Charles Mauryan in Paris 1863. So we have, we have a knight down in this case. So b3, e5, bishop b2. So Nimzo Larsen attack system. And he plays, you know, what you would play in a Nimzo Larsen attack system. You would play e3. You're trying to, you know, get a dark square grip going on. Now he fianchettos the other bishop. f5, knight h3. This is often a good square actually instead of f3. It doesn't block in the bishop, inhibit it on the diagonal. So there's again the power of these two fianchettoed bishops. And the knight can sometimes swing to f2 anyway. It's not so bad. Knight f6, bishop. And actually instead of bishop g2, which is a routine move, he actually plays bishop b5. Immediately threatening this pawn by pinning that knight. Bishop d6. Another dark square grip. f4 is taking hold. Queen e7. Both sides castle. c4. Okay, a6. He doubles the pawns, giving up the light square bishop. F takes, creating a nice square for the knight on f4. Bishop takes e5. d4. Kicks the bishop. In fact, ouch, the bishop is squashed. The bishop hasn't got any squares. Disaster. He's won a piece. Oh dear, he's won a piece. Or has he? Black can actually play queen takes e3 check, giving the bishop an escape square back just in time. King g2, bishop e7. But even here, the bishop is still threatened. So rook e1, skewing queen and bishop. Black's playing very resourcefully though. Black plays knight g4. Did Morphy see all this? So that if rook takes e3, knight takes e3 is winning the queen back. So he can't play rook takes e3. Has Black got away with this? Thankfully the knight is holding up the f2, otherwise queen f2 would have been a threat. So Morphy plays bishop c1 here. What is going on now? Queen, if the queen doesn't want to drop back and just lose the bishop, it attacks the rook. But now bishop d2. And now white's got time to finally snap this bishop. Queen takes d4, rook takes e7. Again, without worrying, of course, about f2, that's covered. Queen takes c5. He's got some material back. Queen e2. d4. Then let's move b4. Check. King goes back. d3. Now, this is absolutely brilliant. What should we do here? What would you do here if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? White to play. Do you just move your queen? Won't you get destroyed on this diagonal? What if c5 and bishop b7 coming up? What do you want to play here? White to play. I'll give you 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, yeah, bishop c3. Well done, Aphorist and Pat MC. Bishop c3. What? Bishop c3? If d takes, rook takes g7. King here. then we can play this nasty move. Rook takes g4, discovered check, just to eliminate any defensive knight coming back to f6. Just snap it off, and that's mating, isn't it? So very neat move, bishop c3. Black saw this, plays rook f7, check, rook f8. And another very strong move, queen e7, queen f7, and now another very, very powerful move. White plays knight g5, so the knight's covering that f7 square, asking the queen to exchange on e7. Rook takes e7, again threatening g7. Knight f6 to the defense of g7. But now white dominates the position of the rook a e1, dominates that central e file. White's got all the positional trump cards here. a5 looks a bit desperate. White can now proceed to double on the 7th rank with rook takes c7, threatening to put both rooks now on the 7th rank. Okay, so rook e8 is played. Rook d1, a takes, and now Morphy plays bishop takes f6, g takes, knight takes h7, threatening knight takes f6. What a wreck! What a wreck for black. Rook e6, defending f6, but rook takes d3, now threatening to mate. Bishop a6, both rooks now go on the 7th, bishop c4. Okay, and here white takes the time to play a4. Funny enough, black plays b takes a3. Not tempted to allow back row mate if rook takes. So rook g7 check doesn't matter though, because in this position there's a crushing move. In fact, this is why a4 might be really... I'm not sure a4 is absolutely necessary, but white's play here, the final move. Can you spot the final move here? I give you 20 seconds starting from now. What does white's play here? Okay, knight f8 threatens knight g6 mating, and if black actually resigned, he didn't even bother throwing in this check. I mean, the checks would run out here, and if he takes, you know, he just gets mated with the two rooks. That was a pretty amazing game. None of this King's Gambit stuff. This was pretty refined game with a knight odds in many different respects, keeping the tension going, positional play, a piece down, and this position forcibly winning that bishop. Well, you know, it looks as though, you know, black's been resourceful for giving the impression of his bishop being trapped, but Morphy had maybe seen all this, that he's still winning the bishop like this. Amazing. And bishop c3, very, very cute move in the circumstance. And then you got the positional trump cards together, the rooks coordinating. Fantastic. Okay, so knight f8 was the final move. Let's have a look at another game. So this is against No Name in 1858, unfortunately, No Name, but there's a lot of No Name games. Let's have a look anyway. So e4, e5, New Orleans, 24th of March 1858. So we have here knight f6, d4, now knight g5, Paul Morphy playing white, d5, ed, knight takes d5, castles, bishop e7. It looks very much like a fried liver kind of attack now, after knight takes f7, bringing the king out to play. king takes, check, king e6, and now very dynamic, aggressive move, which keeps things going quite well. What would you play here with white if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? What is a very nice dynamic, aggressive move? If just in case you needed to use the D file as a clue. So white to play here. What would you play here if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? I'm not sure rook e1. I'm not sure rook e1 because I would say knight e5 and then maybe bishop f6 to follow, you know, maybe queen d6, you know, I don't know. But knight c3 to me opens up lines, more lines. So putting immediate pressure on this one. Takes check, knight e5. Bishop f4, bishop f6. So it's a bit the improvement here. We've got the d file to play with. Bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5. Slaughtering the king now, or is it rook takes e5, king takes e5. He's brought the king out to play. Check. And we see the d file is quite useful here after king d4, bishop takes d5, because now if queen takes we can just use rook d1. So black's king is not in the right place. This is not a good place for the king. Don't try this at home with your king on d4. So rook e8, check, and the king's been kicked about. Check, 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 check. It's all pretty straightforward. Check, mate. There's no escape. That's it. So that's it. No escape. Ah, what a slaughter. So if we have a look at that again, what on earth happened there? It's like a fried liver system. Knight g5, and then knight takes f7. It's all the elements of the fried liver. It's very fried liver-ish basically. So this was slaughter time here, just getting all the defense, bringing the king down the board to sort of force checkmate. Great stuff. No wonder he wanted no name after that game. So another no name. So this is going to be another embarrassing disaster of some sort. So e4, Paul Morphy against no name in New York 1857. e5, the King's Gambit. Yeah, we saw loads of them last week. Not so many this time, which is quite interesting though. e6, knight f3, g5, trying to cling on to the pawn, bishop c4, g4, and now he just sacks the knight. Forget about moving that. He just sacks the knight with castling. G takes, queen takes. So this f file is great. King still in the centre. Queen f6. Now e5 to open up the e file potentially. And here after queen takes e5, he plays actually bishop takes f7 check, bringing the king out, and now d4. So he's going to quickly open up this f file, giving the d4 pawn, and now bishop e3 to use that pin on the f pawn just to get another tempo. So his rooks are very fast connected here, and you know black's pieces are not really ready to do anything defensive at the moment. Queen goes to f6, check. Queen g6, rook takes f4 check, knight f6, and we've got a similar kind of pattern now. The black king is brought up the board with rook takes f6 check, king takes, bishop d4 check, or is it? No, actually it's kicked to e7 here, check, and this is in grave danger now because we've got things like queen c5 of king d6. So we see king f7, check, queen e6. And he doesn't want to take that queen with the rook. He plays queen f3 check here, which is really, I guess it's much stronger if Morphy played it. So king e8, and this is getting bad now. After check, king d8, and now and only now he takes the queen. D takes, bishop takes h8, and here actually black resigned. So it wasn't actually a checkmate. There, just he's got his material back, and black's had enough. So King's Gambit slaughter. Okay, so another no name. Let's have a look at another no name. So game. This is in New Orleans, back in New Orleans, 1858. So e4, e5, King's Gambit again. Knight f3, we see a bit of difference with c6 now. So black's trying to challenge the centre. So knight c3, bishop b4, bishop c4. Black volunteers the bishop, bishop takes c3, d takes c3. So white's got a control over d5 here. Against d5, knight e7, as though there's an interest in playing d5, but this is stomped out by Morphy's next move, queen d6. No d5 for black here. Queen d6. Black castles. Bishop takes f4, so a nice positional bind. Knight g6. Bishop g5. Black is, this looks like there's one of the very, very classic Morphy games as black where he did this as black, but he's doing this as white now. Black has got a very miserable position here. After queen e8, white just castles. You know, this structure is unfortunate for that bishop on c8. Black tries king h8, rook ae1, f6. And now, actually, we see a really dynamic move played in this position. Can you guess what he plays in this position? Quite brutal, I think. So if I gave you 20 seconds here, what would you play with white? Anyone? What would you play with white here? I'm not entirely sure it was needed, but okay, let's go with it. He played e5, offering the bishop, which wasn't taken. If fg, I expect some sort of disaster with knight takes g5 and knight f7. Black didn't want to go in for this, so he tried to keep things closed with f5. Which isn't that brilliant after knight d4. This f5 pawn is a problem. So a bit miserable. f4. Now e6 is played. D takes. Knight takes e6, attacking the rook. Bishop takes. Rook takes e6. Queen hasn't got too many squares. He doesn't really want to play queen f7. We could just play something like rook takes g6, attacking the queen. Yeah, we've got f8. It's horrible. So the queen goes to c8, and we play rook takes g6 anyway, because now after hg, queen takes g6, we're threatening queen h5 mating. Black tries to parry that with queen f5, but now the crushing rook takes f4 ends up with a totally one position, offering the queen here for a rook temporarily. After rook takes, he's going to get the queen back with check. Check. Takes the queen back. End of game. Black resigned here. This is a nasty pin. So black resigned here. If king takes, we can just play immediately bishop f4 to win material. So a bit of a brutal set of games there against the no-names. Let's go back to Eugene Rousseau in New Orleans. So 1849, Eugene Rousseau. So he's playing white. Okay, e4, and Eugene plays e5. King's Gambit, e takes, knight f3, g5. And now h4 is played, just undermining that structure straight off the bat. g4, knight g5, h6, and knight sack. Knight takes f7, king takes, queen takes g4. So it's quite a lot for the knight. This f-file, black's king safety again called into question. Queen f6, check. You know, if d5 we might consider, well, we've got taking and taking there, so king e7, knight c3. So something has to be done about knight d5, so c6. Interesting move to make sure the attack flows quite well. What does white play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now, white to play here, what would you play here? Quite a fast attacking move in circumstance, I think. Anyone? That isn't bother castling, he just plays e5. He offers the e5 pawn. King d1, now the immediate threat's rook e1. King goes to d8 out of that, rook e1. He's got his rook mobilised very, very quickly. Queen c5. He takes on g8, why not? Ah, this is beautiful. I played through this earlier. I do play through them at least once earlier, and this is quite neat, this finish. This is forcing move delight here after d5. So what does white play here? First crushing forcing move. So forcing move tests begin. White to play. What forcing move is really crushing here? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Anyone? White to play. Yeah. Okay. Check. Yeah. Oh, this bishop's a liability. And it gets worse after takes. Because after king e7, what forcing move is crushing in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Not queen e6, no. Even stronger than queen e6. Yeah, knight takes d5 check. We've got this pin here. Ouch. And the bishop's actually protecting the knight. So king d6 is played, and then we see queen c7 is checkmate. Wow. Okay, so let's go on to against James McConnell, 1849, New Orleans. So e4, e5, we see knight f3 for a change, queen f6, a bit unusual, knight c3, c6, d4, e takes, e5, queen g6. There's a flaw in this one, by the way. It's been commented on a lot on ChessGames.com for being slightly flawed. So this was a young Paul Morphy, and okay, so it's a bit odd. Bishop d3, queen g2. The queen's kicked around like a football for a bit. So we see rook g1, rook g3, rook g5, bishop f1. Okay, and the queen's carried on being kicked around like a football with knight takes d4, queen e7, knight e4, and you think so far so good, right? Okay, but it's a young Morphy. h6, and I had to check the comments because this next move, white to play. Guess what Paul Morphy plays? This is 1849. What does he play in this position? It looks as though by rights, black should be getting absolutely crushed. So what do you think? It's how do I say this? I don't want to sort of guess what Morphy played in this game, which you might find surprising. Anyone? White's playing blunder. I'm going to say it. White's playing blunder. What does he play? Maybe he gets a bit over optimistic. It's the only evidence I've seen, clear evidence that he can be optimistic. But White's playing blunder here. Knight d6 is not a blunder because it's check. It's horrible for black. It wasn't that. White's playing blunder. Yeah, he plays knight f5. I mean, it looks as though by rights he's getting into the d6 square, and his opponent must have been traumatized playing Morphy. There's some comments on Chess Games.com about this. But black has a resource here. Black has a resource which he missed. Can you see black's resource, which would change the picture on this position a little bit? What can black play here if I gave you 20 seconds? I couldn't believe it when I played through it earlier. Right, this could really change the picture. This queen b4 check. I know it looks as though the queen was kicked around a lot, but we are like losing. The rook's hanging. If we move back, the rook's hanging. What can white do here? He doesn't want to lose this knight and then the rook. His opponent didn't do that, so a bit of a blunder. His opponent played queen e6, and then it was plain sailing again. It was just a moment of complacency, shall we say. So knight f d6 check, knight d6, and now the slaughter continues. Bishop c4, queen e7, knight takes f7, king c7, and then this is really neat. This use of the d6 square to get a mating there, queen d6. So the king is driven to b6 now because the knight is controlling d8. So check, and there's no defense, is there? Rook g3 now threatens rook a3, and black gets mated. So black missed his chance with queen b4, which would have really helped. Okay, so 1850. In 1850, we got another no-name game. In 1850. I think this is why I didn't like studying Morphy at some point, because of all these no-name games. But the reason they're no-name, maybe they just didn't want their name to these slaughters, so they are quite instructive. So what can you do? You have to go through them. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. We have a knight g5, fried liverish position coming up. Is it? Yes. Fried liver. Check. And now, nowadays, I think d4 is the strongest. So, but he played knight c3. Or is it? Sorry, I think d4 is stronger. So, knight c e7. Now, he didn't play d4, he played castles, c6. Now d4. E takes. check, and well, doesn't it look too bad for king safety here? Knight takes d5, bishop takes d5. It looks so routine, this game. King c7, check. I mean, the king's had it already. King safety's been shot to pieces. Bishop d6. What does white play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now, what would you play here to finish black off? Accurate move. An accurate move is needed. Anyone? White to play. What's the most accurate move here? Okay, yeah, I believe this is the most accurate move. Queen c5 check. It's pretty embarrassing. If he'd done anything else, black would be left off the hook. It would be a different story. If he'd done this, you know, what's the big deal? You know, white's just a rook and a bishop down. But by playing queen c5, you know, it justifies the whole thing. Black's getting mated. Plays this, queen takes d6, and he gets checkmated. So that was that. Okay, so let's have a look at another. So 1850, James McConnell against Morphy. And this is intriguing. I can't believe this game. I cannot believe this is played in 1850, this game, and it looks like a modern French defence. e4, and Paul Morphy plays the French defence. That's a shock. Okay, now please tell me, have you seen this game before? Because I'm in shock at how this is played. d4, d5, we have the advanced French. c5. You see, in the evolution of style, the idea of undermining pawn structures was apparently later, after the Romantic era. You know, the hypermoderns undermining pawn structures at the bases of the chains. He's playing the French defence, you know, like we understand the French defence nowadays. He's putting pressure on d4, f4, queen b6. He's putting intense pressure on d4. He's playing the French defence like a modern French defence. Paul Morphy. Knight f3, and he plays bishop d7. This is like Irva's waiting move, bishop d7. I mean, there's no fault to this. a3, and now another very good move you might consider here with black, if you're a French defence player, to try and put even more pressure on d4. He plays knight h6. Keeps the bishop eyeing c5. The knight can come to f5. And, you know, white's playing a plan which is sometimes seen in games. You know, this a3 and b4. He takes on d4. White takes. And now he plays rook c8. And white plays bishop b2, which might not be best. Bishop might be a little bit of a target there. It's not protected. Sometimes it's a bit of a target on b2. Knight f5. Intense pressure on d4. Queen d3. And black to play. Black to play here. What does he play in this position? If I gave you 20 seconds starting from now. So black to play. Anyone? What does black play here? Come on, guess. Anyone, guess. I'm going to have to show you. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you another 5 seconds and show you. No one's guessing it. I can't believe it. Bishop takes b4 check is played. You know, he's got his rook ready to coordinate here. After a takes, knight takes. He's got knight c2 check coming up. Or rook c2. So queen d2. Rook c2. The queen's been run out of squares here. And actually after queen d1, knight e3, white actually resigned. His queen's been mated. I find that impressive, and also I find there's the same characteristic recently in a game I put on YouTube with Fischer playing what seemed to be a French defense transposition, and it led to a very sharp forcing move, destruction of white. So it seems Fischer and Morphy can play closed positions and turn them into open positions very rapidly, and he did that here, but it features undermining the pawn chain, which I thought was ahead of his time. Where did he learn to play the French defense? I don't know how many of you have seen this game, but culturally it's a bit shocking to see this game, well, at least for me anyway. So the first American Congress, 1857, Paul Morphy against Alexander Beaufort Meek. So e4, e6. He's playing against the French defense now. Meek's French defense. d4, g6. Bit weird to play this though. This fianchetto. So bishop e3, knight e7. He plays knight e2, and he's ready to strengthen his centre though on both sides here. So it's not just a pretty setup here. It's actually quite functional to be able to handle the fianchettoed bishops, to be able to to put the barriers up to the fianchettoed bishops here in the centre. And in fact, this is what happens. You get this ridiculous thing which looks as though what are you doing with white, trying to make a cake or something look pretty with the knights here and the bishops here, and but it's actually quite functional, one could argue, because it's blunting both bishops, isn't it? So bishop b7. So black's trying to play like a hippopotamus defense, but now commits to d5. Okay, e5, castles, f4. If white's given time, he could consider just smashing through with f5 here. So black plays f5. We see h3, knight d7, king h2. So it looks as though he's interested in principle in a g4 at some point. After c5, c3, c4, a6, knight f3, h6. Now he does play g4. He's just trying to rip open this g file. King h7, rook g1, rook g8. The queen slips in. The attack with queen e1. So it's got some useful squares here like h4 at the moment. Black covers the h4 square with knight c6, eyeing h4. But knight h4 is embarrassing. Oh dear, what do we do about g6? What can be done about g6? And this bishop is having a great time on this diagonal. Maybe black should consider knight e7 to go back and move, but he played actually queen f8, and this is just inviting this line, this ripping open king safety move, which is begging to be played here. I don't know if I can legitimately ask you to guess it, so I'm just going to show you it. Knight takes g6, just ripping open black's king. So king takes, g takes f5, king f7, f takes e6 check, king takes, and now f5. If nothing else, we've got really good pawns here to smash black with. King e7, check, king e8, f6. Black's rooks are disconnected here, so actually the defensive task is going to be quite hard. Bishop takes f6, e takes, Rook takes g1, ready to recharge with rook takes g1. So this rook and bishop are not really helping king safety right now. Knight takes f6, check, check. Now bishop takes h6. Rook, queen h8, rook g7, threatening f6. And this is just hopeless. This is a hopeless position. Embarrassing. After knight g8, actually, black resigned with this move. So I think bishop g6 is crunch time. Okay, that's really embarrassing. So again, you know, we have a closed position here, and Morphy's playing exactly the right things to peel open the G file systematically. This is exactly like how I'd imagine any modern, you know, really strong player would play this position. Just slowly, systematically open the G file, and the sack on G6 entirely like logical here. Doesn't have to be calculated to the end. You know, black's resources are not really going to help king safety. You know, this rook recharging on G1 is threatening to crash through. So crushing. I think I'm nearly coming to the end of the games I wanted to show you this session. Okay, one or two more. And so Paul Morphy against Lowenthal again. So this is in 1858 against French defence, and he plays the exchange variation. Knight f3, knight f6, bishop d3, bishop e6, castles, bishop d6, knight c3, c6, knight e5. And you know, this knight e5 smacks of like Pillsbury binds and playing f4. It is again a little bit like not quite in the romantic era, because this kind of stuff was played especially by players like Sultan Khan later. You know, getting a knight on e5 and then using f4. You got a kind of spearheading knight to spearhead an attack. Queen b6, bishop e3. Okay, offering that b2 pawn. Black really doesn't want to take that. Knight b7, f4, and I suspect black might have a resource here based on this loose bishop, but it wasn't tested, and I didn't engine check it. He plays actually. I'm not entirely sure it really works. Black played bishop takes e5 after f takes. Is it the case? That black has knight takes e5? In the game, black actually played knight g4. Let's have a quick look if there's a quick refutation. Knight takes e5. Does anyone see something really good for white here? I mean, maybe something like knight a4 is strong. But if I gave you 20 seconds here, what would you play with white? Actually, knight a4 is really strong, because this knight's going to be hanging after. So knight a4, that can't be used, can it? Because we're on the f6 knight, so forget that. Just a thought. So in the game, we see knight g4, queen d2, knight takes, queen takes, and black does take on b2 now. Knight e2, queen a3, knight f4. Queen goes to e7. Rook a b1. He's got enough, you know, pressure for that b pawn. A lot of pressure on black. Black castles queen side. Bishop e2, which makes way for the queen to try and probe b7. Knight b6. Queen b3. Rook goes to d7. Knight d3. That's a nice square for the knight. That's c5. Knight c4, knight c5, attacking the rook. The rook goes to c7. Queen a4. And now, this is a bit of a problem. King b8, we've got knight a6 check. So black plays b6, and white just plays bishop takes c4. The king safety is a bit of a problem here. After takes check, king d7, Bishop b7, very strong. Because after rook d8, what does white play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, so yeah, bishop takes c6 check, and black actually resigned here. If rook takes c6, rook b7, and that rook is dropping off. This isn't very nice, for example. So queenside attack was pretty nice here. If we go back, so he offered that pawn, and black's king never had any peace. If he had tried castling on this side, would that have been a different story? It seems to be a ready-made attack with this advanced pawn chain if black castle kingside. Okay, so maybe white could play things like rook f3 if the king's over here. Double. It's not that pleasant. Oh, not rook g3. Maybe rook g3 if that bishop's on there. So okay, it's not that pleasant. But okay, one last game. So Anderson Morphy in Paris, 1858. So e4, e6, Paul Morphy playing white, d4, g6. It seems to be a bit popular at the time, this e6 and g6, but it is weakening quite a few dark squares. Bishop d3, bishop g7, bishop e3. And actually, Lowenthal's notes indicate the student cannot fail to observe that in almost every French defense game, he calls it French game, Mr. Morphy plays his bishops to e3 and d3, and they appear well placed here and come into efficient action when called upon. It is a novelty, however, in chess play, and will doubtless meet with attention at the hands of authors on the game. So anyway, c5, c3, but he's reserved his options for c3 and f3. So c takes, he's showing that c file. Knight c6, knight e2, knight g e7, castles, and he's got that nice c3 square for the other knight, d5, e5, f6, f4, keeping the wedge on e5 here, f takes, which gives white that nice f4 for probing that pawn potentially, a6, queen d2, knight b4, doesn't mind giving up the light square bishop, bishop g5, knight takes d3, queen takes d3. This bishop is a problem piece here. Bishop d7, queen h3, and it looks as though knight f4 is a serious problem for e6. Queen e8. In fact, knight f4 is not played here. Actually, maybe just knight f5 now that the knight's been unpinned. So knight f4, knight f5 would be possible. So in fact, instead of knight f4, now we see knight g3. So if knight f5, maybe we consider just exchanging it off. We see rook c8, white takes on f8, queen takes, rook f1, queen e8, and now queen h4. So putting the question to that knight, does it want to go to f5 and be exchanged off for this guy? Well, it does. Knight f5, knight takes f5. And we've got a problem. Black's position is creaking because of knight takes d5 if e takes. So he has to play g takes. And now we've got this potentially dangerous attack after rook f3. This rook is just crudely threatening to swing and do disaster on g7. Black plays bishop b5, rook g3, rook c7, bishop f6. Big trouble for black. Black tries f4. Now actually Morphy himself annotates king h8, why king h8 might fail. Let's have a quick look at this. King h8. So in his notes, rook takes g7, rook takes g7, knight takes b5, a takes b, no, queen takes b5, queen h6, drives the queen back to d7. Wow, h4. And this looks really unpleasant. And Morphy's continuation continues like this. h5. He's given an example that black's not really doing much. Interesting. Oops. I'm not sure what the point of this was. It's just showing that the white king can go up. This is a Morphy variation for this game. I'm not just making it up. I think I'm just trying to read the annotation notes. So queen c7, so the king can go to f4. a3, queen d7, king f2. Okay, is there a point to it? Queen d7, queen takes h6, queen takes, e takes, king g8. Oh, the point is f4. Alright, king e5. Okay. King f4, king f7, king e5, and Morphy concludes white must win. It's a variation, apparently, that Paul Morphy gave himself. So black played f4. It was a very serious match. The Anderson-Morphy match was very serious and very analysed compared to the other games we looked at. So f4 was played, but this allows Paul to just do a transformation into an endgame pretty soon. After queen takes f4, white can now just swap everything off into a winning king and pawn ending. So he plays knight takes queen h6, and now he can very simply just swap everything off. With rook takes g7. Actually, he doesn't take on g7 here. He first plays king f2. It was easy to just, I think there were other ways to win it. He could have just taken on g7. Now he takes on g7, and this is just a winning king and pawn ending now. King f3. The king, well, b4 is played. We see g4, b6, h4, b5, king e3, and you know if white gets in, you know, this, that's it. And these two pawns handle, you know, black's king. Because any h5 we've got. Well, I think we just munch up these two and just queen with this one. So b3 is played, a3, and black actually resigned here. And that's it from this week. Okay. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, that was good. I quite enjoyed that. Hope any of you guys did. So, comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much. See you next week.